Again, welcome. Thank you for choosing this session to attend. I know you've got a whole host that you could have seen, so it means something to really come here. So thank you all in advance for that. So I'm going to kick off and tell you a little bit about myself and what my background is. So who am I? I'm Christopher Heapy. As you probably guessed, I'm from London. The accent may have given it away. I've been using Tableau now for about 6 years, so in actual terms that makes me a bit of a dinosaur as far as the software goes. And I'm a member of the professional services team. One of my most recent achievements has actually been voted the MVP for Global Consulting Services in 2016. So when I'm talking, I'm going to be basing a lot of this on actual real-life experience, which is good for you guys because it means that it's not just all theory, it's kind of practical knowledge that has been applied. So what does it actually mean to be a member of the professional services team here at Tableau? Well, what that means is I specialize in directly empowering organizations on architecture, strategy, best practices, and empowerment using the power of data. In reality, what that means, because that's a little bit ethereal, is that I stop organizations from having people walk into board meetings with 400-page reports. You're laughing, but I've seen this happen. I stop frustration as people can't get answers to the questions that they have in a timely manner. And I manage the difference between basing a business decision on data fact and gut feeling. Does anyone actually work in an organization now where you're kind of basing a lot of your decisions on gut instinct? People saying, I feel like this is the right thing to do. Yeah, I see some nods around the room. But, you know, that's all kind of very professional, a bit boring. So what is it that's also about myself? Like you guys, it's not just what I do inside of work that defines me. I'm an occasional balloon saxophone player. I'm a traveler. I generally love to go and see places, and thankfully with my role I get to do that. And I'm also kind of an embarrassing person, so stuff like this happens much more regularly than I wish it did. Yeah, we've all been there. I was actually singing a Kings of Leon song, so you know, I'll let you guess the song title on that one. So all in all, I'm actually a little bit of a nerd, and I don't think I'm probably the only one in the room that would describe themselves that way. Some of you are like, I'm seriously not a nerd, you are. So, like all of you, I love to learn. I spend a lot of my time actually taking things apart, whether that's a washing machine, a light bulb, or you know, anything else out there, or just learning things about my field. So that's a lot about me. Let's talk about you guys. I've made some assumptions about probably the audience that are going to attend this session. You're welcome. The first is that you're familiar with Tableau. You guys have probably been using Tableau for a little while now, and you know some of the features and some of the benefits that come with using it inside of your organization. I mean, after all, that's why you're at Tableau conference, right? The other is you've probably got past experience using other software types for BI or analysis. So that could be something like Cognos, Business Objects, or Excel. You have seen the light, and you're now trying to build interactive dashboards for people to use. Yeah? This is an amazing opportunity. You guys are architects for people's insight in your company, and it's a massive responsibility. But most of all, you're leaders who are trying to change the way things are done inside your organization. You probably are what we'd describe as champions. You're trying to push the Tableau values into your organizations, and you're trying to make the most of that. But what else are you? Well, for this session, you are secret agents, right? And if you start to look at the skills, you'll come to see how I came to this conclusion. You're highly skilled. You're object-orientated and results-focused. You're ingenious in the way that you combine multiple data sources together to offer additional insight. You're creative in the way that you present it. I'm hoping that you guys aren't creating just tables and crosstabs in Tableau. Hands up. Excellent. And you're experts in your field. That means that you probably have a lot of company knowledge inside of your area of expertise, and you're trying to share that with the business. And like any good secret agent, you're used to dealing with highly sensitive information. Yeah? But more important than all of this is you're versatile, evolvable, and you're curious. And you're using all of this skill set to solve mysteries using the power of your secret weapon, data. Now, I don't know. If you look into this, you can actually see that you guys are probably like, you've given me some lovely compliments, thank you ever so much, but what are we going to get out of this session? What is it that we're going to walk away? Well, I want you to be able to create a beautiful, slick, informative, and customizable user experience that will impact your business at an executive level. So how do we actually do this, right? How can we even begin? Well, let's start with the planning of our mission. Yeah? There's something that you can do before your hand even touches the mouse. And this is something that I see when I go into a lot of organizations that they don't actually do. And that is, you have to plan what your objectives as an individual that's producing this content are. So you want to create something that is informative, blows people away, and looks interesting, stays focused, and doesn't let redundant detail creep in, is clear and straightforward. So everyone just take a few seconds and really look at this slide, because we're going to come back to it later. Now we've clearly defined what we want. Let's use this when we go in. So like every exec level project, there's probably going to be a meeting, or several meetings, or a phone call, or an email exchange. There's going to be a dialogue between you and another member of your company. And you need to know how to host these conversations. As experience has told me, they're not always easy. So let's talk about how we actually deal with them. How I start any project is asking them what 5 questions they need to know the health of their business. That's a really important question, because if you're in a room of executives, you'll actually have them debate with one another about what's actually valid and what they want to look at or what they want to see. For everybody else, if it's a one-on-one dialogue, it really puts things into perspective as to what they might want to see on their dashboard and how they prioritize that. That first thing that they say when they shout that out, usually it's a metric of some kind, a performance against a financial target perhaps. That's what they want to see first. That is the #1 priority item that has to go on that dashboard. And you can get this information just by how they actually structure this conversation with you. But this isn't always how it happens. You know, sometimes you actually need to lead the conversation a little bit further. And to do that, you need to ask them additional questions to really flesh out what it is that you're trying to get to. What targets do they look at first? How regularly will the report be consumed? If it's a daily, monthly, or quarterly report, that usually gives you an indication as to the kind of comparisons that they would like to see. What do you think the most important KPIs are? What are things that they want to indicate good and bad health in their business? When are you planning to review? Is this using a tablet, a mobile, a desktop, a giant 4K screen in the middle of their company office? You need to know this information because it will affect what kind of visualizations you use down the line. So these are some of the things that I like to tackle, and I call these perspectives. Usually an executive will have an existing report. Don't be afraid to ask what you would change about this report. Take something away. What do you find that you skip over most? What is only useful on a quarterly point? All of these questions are kind of valid. But I know what you're thinking. Not every conversation goes anywhere nearly as smoothly as that. They're going to object. Yeah? You're all sat there and you're like, yeah, okay, I can see where you're trying to go, but there's going to be things that they say. They'll say things like, everything is important. I need more information than this. I don't want the answer to just 5 questions. Or my personal favorite, but I need to see the detail. Yeah? Everyone's been asked this once or twice. I had a customer, or a client even, who shan't be named, but to put it into perspective, I speak to the executive, and they wanted to see an individual components identification number down to a part. Now, for a small business, this is doable. It's not best practice, but we can do this. But this executive was in charge of a $2.3 billion company. Now, I don't think there have been many people that had said no to him, but I did that day. And I'm hoping that you all can draw upon that strength. So let me tell you the secret for handling this. In order to win, you need to be able to articulate what it is that you are trying to build for them. Do you remember those points I asked you to memorize right at the beginning? Some of you were like, please don't ask me what they were. What we need to do is make our objectives their objectives. We need to ask them in a very direct way, do you not want something that tells you how your business is doing at a glance? That is easy to understand, is flexible, things can be swapped in and out, is Tableau, it's very agile, is intuitive, and most importantly, again, simple. At the end of the day, this dashboard isn't going to answer every single question that they have around the organization. What it is going to give them an ability to take action. It's something that will allow them to have a conversation from a universal starting point across their organization. Now, I generally know that this is difficult to do. Trust me, I do it almost every week at any kind of company you can imagine. But you really need to have these kind of conversations to be successful, because otherwise you're at the mercy of just putting in the practice that you guys have had in previous reporting softwares. Other things that you can do if the battle still doesn't feel like it's going in your favor is remind them that their time is valuable and precious. There's nothing that anyone loves more than being told that their time really means something. And so you can actually use this to your advantage and say, if I'm trying to save you time, I'm trying to make you more efficient, why are you fighting this? Explain to them that they have the right number of detail, the right level of detail, for what they need to see. A great point that I have is if I work in any kind of sales or commission-based company, is align the level of detail for the dashboard to the level of KPIs that they have or their commission structure. If you have a regional KPI or a regional commission number, let the dashboard sit at that level. Why are you worrying about everything else below when your number's not indicated or derived from it? Trying to point out as well that they employ people to look at smaller and higher level of granularity. A lot of companies now make it a real big message that they employ the right kind of people. Recruitment processes are more rigorous than they ever have been before, so they need to depend on that process. They need to allow to let go a little bit and let people do their job so that they can do theirs. Say this to them. Imagine if every single manager in an organization had a dashboard that was like the executive dashboard, but for themselves. The business would practically manage itself, and that's really what a data-driven culture is all about. In the modern world, they need to work by exception. I guess some of you have seen the keynote that was this morning. You can see that we are moving to put in alerts, metrics, these kind of things. This is all so that we can empower people so that they don't have to sift through lots of information to find the insights provided to them on an automatic basis, and we can take advantage of that. Another thing to remind them about is that the data's never hidden. They can click on any data point and view the underlying data. This is something that they've always had access to. So there's no need to build that crosstab. They get a summary and they get the underlying data at just a click of a button. The other thing to point out is the fact that it's distributable. They can send out the view that they are looking at. Remember we talked about universal starting point? They can send that exact indication that something has gone wrong to the person that's responsible and say, hey, what's up? They don't need to invest any more time chasing that up. That person should then be able to go to them with the answer to the question. If it's a truly empowered organization, it should be in a dashboard format of its own. Now, if the shoe still doesn't fit, you are still fighting the good fight, but they are unrelenting. There is a last tactic, and that is telling them about all of the other dashboard types out there. You need to really point out the fact that what you are trying to build is an executive level dashboard, but if they want more information, there are dashboards that can hold this information and give it you in a far better format. Quite often you'll see a inclination that they'll want to see something at a high level granularity. Doing things like a analytical dashboard where you can see high levels of granularity, which is all about exploring the relationship between data points, is an excellent way to showcase that. Just put it on a different dashboard for them to use. But then keep explaining to them that you're going to try and give them this executive level dashboard, because once they actually have it, they'll want to use that. So, hopefully you've got all of that out of the way. Yeah? You've had a discussion with your executive. You've agreed on the dimensions, the measures. You've been told what's most important in the business. You're all fired up. You're ready to get this project going. There's one step I'm about to tell you, and I'm please asking you to pay attention. If there's nothing else to walk out of this with, it's this. You must not skip this step. I want you to review how easy it is to create and maintain. Now, there's a really important reason for why I'm saying this to you. I have been in many organizations that have created something to please an executive, which is a few months down the line turned into the bane of their life. All of those little manual tweaks that they have to make to whether that's data processing or an automation or governance that hasn't been done to work around to produce something in a timely manner has ended up becoming a full-time role for somebody to keep and maintain at some point in the future. So I really want you to take the time to investigate this. We've all done it. I've done it myself. I mean, if anyone actually needs any motivation, this is something that I built for a client customer. And what you're looking at is a schema to get a single BPS calculation. Those solid lines are direct dependencies. All of these are completely dynamic. The dotted fields are LODs, or dynamic filtrations through parameters. And the hierarchy of levels are the best attempt I had at mapping what I was actually doing, because you'll notice some just skip levels completely and go right to the end. I'm not ashamed to say that for the first time in my life after completing this, I felt like this. I woke up to cold sweats of, can we just get it to do something else, or why isn't it working quite how I anticipated? Only to find out that it's an issue with the underlying data because I didn't do this due diligence before producing the report. This is a really important piece, but it's actually fully within your power to control. So once you have actually had this discussion, I really want you to look at how it can be best governed. Look at where the data comes from. Look at its consistency. Does the underlying data structure change? Do the naming conventions change? Look at how it's delivered. Is it your team that's even delivering or empowering this, or are you relying on other departments that have their own commitments to produce this information? Does it need to be centralized? Does your team need to take possession of this if it's going to become your product for the executive? Does it need to be normalized? Or does it need to be governed by IT at a higher level? Does it need to be absorbed into some kind of official data structure if it's even coming from outside of your databases? If you are looking at this and you're thinking yes to any of them, I want you to do something. I want you to go straight back to your executive and tell them about the problems that you are facing. Why? Because they've prioritized this information that they've asked for as the most important thing for their business. They have created your business case for creating change in your organization that you can then push through. It's a really important point, and you should take advantage of that, because there's not many other projects that have that level of buy-in right from its immediacy. So congrats. We've done all of the above. We've spoken about how best to plan out how to create this dashboard. But we're going to get to the fun stuff. Design. Now, do we really truly understand design? We need to know a couple of things. We need to be clear what the enemy looks like, what bad looks like. Now, what I'm about to show you are some examples of bad design that I've seen. This one, there's a lot of wasted space where there is content. It's fairly cluttered. There's high levels of granularity. The dials are dials. The interface is not particularly appealing, and the table in the middle is overbearing with the color palette. This one, it has no variety. The color palette, though improved, still doesn't help us with the actual informational content that you're looking for. The overall views at the top seem, again, very cluttered and unclear of what they're actually saying. Is that for a total period or just the latest value in some kind of discrete measure? Or this one, kind of text overload. There are some other common mistakes that we can try to tackle early on. Does anyone recognize this dashboard by any chance? Yeah. So it's from the Superstore dataset. This is one of the new ones that come with 10.1. Except it's not hugely obvious because you've got scroll bars on the bottom and the right-hand side. You need to make sure that it doesn't exceed the boundaries of a single screen. When you're dealing with resizing and setting up for different kind of devices, this is really important. You can have horizontal scrolling and you can have vertical scrolling, but both together create generally a horrible user experience. And that, at the end of the day, is what you guys have got to tackle head on. It's worth noting that in Tableau 10, however, you do have ranges that you can now fix. Has anyone actually used these? Yeah? No? A couple of nods around the room. So this is an excellent way to actually get your dashboard to resize dynamically for a number of different devices and to give the best presentation possible. How about this? Can anyone tell me what this is? No. Because it's missing something. Context. How about now? Can anyone want to take a guess? Hands up if you think you could tell me what this chart means. Just, come on. I'm actually glad to see no one's hands up, because you're missing an axis. It's actually, oh, if I click again. There we go. If you look on that bottom axis, you'll also notice that I used an area chart for something which is not time-related. One of the reasons you don't want to do this is because each one of those data points infer that there's a relationship from one to the other point. It doesn't make sense when you're using something like a subcategory field. So this also covers a little bit about using appropriate charts for the data type that you're using. Another thing to avoid is excessive detail. This is simply showing too much information for the kind of dashboard type that we're trying to create. What could you do? Create this as a bar chart. Provide the top and bottom 5 or 10. Make it dynamic so people can set how many they want to see. Because that gives them some control and they don't feel like there's data then been hidden, and they give the most important data points for their dashboard or data type. At the same point, we don't want to be deficient in detail. This one bar just isn't really helpful at all. Meaningless variety. The bubble chart is a great chart, but not for an executive dashboard. For those of you that are thinking, oh, it's not so bad, I can get it down to 3 or 4 bubbles. If you're doing that, just use a bar chart. There's nothing wrong with them. For most of my dashboards, I rely on bar charts, line charts, area charts. If I'm feeling particularly spicy, I'll use a tree map. These can be great filtering tools, much more efficient than the bubble chart. In this data set, you'll see that there's an issue in the east with sales. Anyone guess what that is? It's the damn tables in the east. The other things that we can kind of go over, more likely because I think you've probably heard them before, is color palettes, right? Emphasis colors, don't use reds, blacks, yellows, ambers, your marketing favorites. Avoid those from your dashboards because they emphasize things and detract from everything else. We've got an amazing set of color palettes inside of Tableau, so please utilize these. They've been really, really carefully put together. If you have to use some color branding, make sure that you dial it down. You can use the transparency control inside Tableau to just make it a little bit more manageable. I have worked for a number of clients whose key favorite colors are black, red, and white. It never ends pretty. The other thing to bear in mind is color blindness. I myself am severely colorblind. I genuinely can see very few colors. So make sure you don't exclude your audience by bad choices of colors. And if you have to explain this, a really nice way is say, if I was a marketing manager and I asked you today, we're about to send out a campaign that instantly removes 10% of the population that you were going to send it to, would you do it? And they'd say no. So use the same argument, but put it in different perspectives. The other is around emphasis of areas. So obviously in the Western culture, you've got a left to right, top to bottom way of viewing dashboards. Make use of this. Don't put the most important information in the bottom right corner because people probably won't see it unless you really emphasize it in some way. That could be using an emphasis color, for instance. And the next slide probably shouldn't have been in the presentation, but just because I genuinely hate them, you've got pie charts. Just avoid them, please, for the love of God. Bars are better, but if you really must, you can always use a donut chart. These are just as good as any kind of pie chart that you're going to build, and they can give you more information by actually coding in some kind of measure into the center. So these are great things to actually have. So we now know what not to do. We've covered some of the main areas about things that we might want to fall afoul of and avoid when designing for an executive. But now we want to see, what can we do? Well, I want you to look at this dashboard that you build and be able to walk away with a message from it within 5 seconds. If it fails that test, then it needs to be redesigned. If you can do it, however, you've won half of the actual game, you've won half of the actual battle. So brace yourselves. We're going to go through quite a lot of content in quite a short amount of time. You've got the visual hierarchy. Here, you want to create inside of your dashboards a natural narrative, high level, lower level. I'm not saying lowest because we shouldn't be going down to that level. Big breakdowns or 3 or 4 dimensions is the most that you'd want to go down to. effective use of color. Here we've used color to actually highlight the fact that there's 3 entities which are losing money. Typography and language. Make sure that all of your language is emotive or questioning, because that lets you, without even having to create much of a description, show people what the dashboard's trying to show. Other things to note is that you can put all of this in titles, axes, key facts and figures are all really important, but make sure you shed those decimal places unless they're absolutely necessary. The other thing is tooltips. Really make use of them. You can empower a lot of your organization with additional information through a tooltip, especially with some of the keynote that's come in, charts in charts. It's going to be pretty awesome, and it's better to set them up before that is even out. Effective use of graphical elements. So do use a logo. If I'm building with an executive in the room, the very first thing I do is Google their logo and put it in the top left corner. They love eye candy, so give it to them and you'll be their best friend. On the bad side, don't use a color palette, as I've mentioned, that marketing have put together. Not always are marketing colors the best ones to use. Now here's an example of one of the dashboards I showed you earlier, and this is it within Tableau. See how much more improved that is, how much clearer. It's the same data, but different story. Now we get to do a bit more exciting stuff. Oh, don't worry, I'm gonna, oh, we may have to worry. Can you guys see that? Yeah, excellent, okay. So this is actually some live dashboards that I built for clients over the time. Some of you have probably been wondering around whether or not you should ever fix a dashboard or unfix a dashboard. It's kind of an interesting question, and you get a lot of design elements with each. On this one, you'll actually see that every single one of those elements are floating above a picture image. That's how I got that custom shadowing underneath. It looks really impressive, it looks really clean, and for the executive, they loved it. I had really clear KPI indicators here. This was built for a tablet to be consumed, so I left just enough on the bottom here so that they know that there's more content beneath. So they'd scroll up and down. I built in customization, give them the ability to customize how they actually view the data and over what period. I've got heat maps, those generally go down really well. Big key numbers for all of the last. What's better than a key KPI? Trend information. So if you can put that in, absolutely do. It's a really powerful tool to make sure that you're adding additional content and value through your dashboard design. Another thing you might want to do is give them the ability to change a viz type. This is a really neat little trick with parameters. Just put in popping sheets. You'll need a vertical container, and those can be added in very easily to your dashboards. You'll see that I noticed earlier around the fact that I wanted to put in the top 10 and bottom 10. Having it right here next to the country and having everything filterable really helps you actually do this. And it makes them feel like they've not got data hidden from them. They've got a big high-level starting point, and then they can actually start to customize and refine what it is that they're actually looking for. Moving on to a different dashboard that I built. Give it a second. Does anyone notice, first thing, these icons and the really clean indications across 5, 6, of their biggest numbers that they need to pay attention to. They love the fact that from opening it on any device that they see this immediately. You've got a really clear sales line, so they can see how their business changes and ebbs and flows. If I was feeling fancy, I could have put a forecast on there, but for this type of dashboard, they only wanted to be based on actual performance. My use of language, check out how many stores we have, a breakdown of the stores, their placements, their sales. See where sales are taking place. what amount of sales fit within each profit bin. I'm posing all of this information as questions so that they know how to interpret the graph immediately. One of the things that will make you a god in the business is generally allowing the fact that they can build their own viz. So with a couple of parameters, I can actually change the level of detail that's shown in this graph, and I can change what measure they're looking at. Oh. All right, that one's broken. But if you put that in a parameter, generally you guys will be able to switch between that, and it will really help the executive feel like they've got more control over what it is that they're seeing. And at the end of the day, that's going to leave them with a more refined product that they're happier with. Another key note to make is the fact that you can now design for different devices. So for this dashboard, I've actually got a desktop version. A tablet version, and you can see how they view it. You can see how they view it based on this window. And a phone layout. You'll notice that I've been able to use a lot of the same visual components amongst all of them. That's because the way it was originally designed was such a high level. There isn't great amounts of granularity, so I don't deal so much with some of the issues of when you do. Has anyone had the hashes when you've got labeling? Too many labels in too small a space? Anyone get that? Yeah? Or tooltips, all these kind of things that come up. I make sure that I give them all the information they need without actually having to write it down. I minimize the amount of numbers that they have on screen. I make it, again, interactive. Everything's clickable, filterable, interactive, constructible. The only thing I cut out of the mobile was build your own chart. But that's because on a phone it becomes a little bit finicky. Does anyone have any questions at all around this? No?
What advice do you have for people that still want to print this out and have a paper copy when the whole point is to be interactive?
Great question. So it relies a little bit on obviously having the infrastructure to share. So if nobody has a Tableau server license or a Tableau online license, that can be an issue. What I tend to do is set a default, which is just an A4 paper page. And if you guys are familiar with any kind of batch scripts, you can usually write something that actually will automatically PDF that out for you. There's tutorials online through Google that you can download. What I would say, though, is by doing that, you're enabling a problem. Yeah? You should urge them to actually share an image or share a subscription, or by all means package a workbook and send it out and have them have Tableau Reader. But for the main form, if you are finding that you're doing that for a large population, they should really be looking at the server product or an online product. Any other questions at all? Yeah, at the back.
Are those icons conditional so that if, for example, sales are down, that they change to a different slope, or are they just there for highlighting?
Yeah, so they absolutely could be. They're just shape files, so they could change color dynamically. On this one, they actually didn't really have too much KPI. This is more of like an informative thing. They just had, they were quite early on in their career, this company, so they didn't really have a lot of historical information to compare against. But yeah, absolutely. On my other dashboard, that was something that I implemented immediately because the client for this one actually had quite a quantifiable financial target that you could compare against. Anyone else?
For parameters, what's kind of like the general amount of time executives usually tolerate for it to refresh? Is it like 10 seconds? Is it 5 seconds? Just for them to be kind of annoyed with how flexible it gets?
Sure. It depends a little bit on your executive and what other reports you've got hosted on the environment for them. It's generally best benchmark that it's around the average that they have for most of the views. The good thing is if it's parameters, it's usually really fast to populate. It should be almost instantaneous because the level of detail that you're actually setting it to is so high level. If I switch now to the other view, got this filtered. That'll be why. You can see that it's really pretty fast, so no one would really complain around that speed. On practical knowledge, I guess, about 6 seconds is when people would start to be a bit bugged if every change, that was how long it was taken to refresh. Any other questions at all? Guy at the back, yep.
So let's say the executives, they love it, they send it to their direct reports, they start using it. How do you frame the conversation so that people aren't just like, well, can you add this other filter so I can view my own region, or can you add this other filter? Like, how do you manage that conversation where it's like, this isn't the dashboard for everyone, it's just for the executive, but the executive loves it so much, wants to share it there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the beautiful things about Tableau is it's highly flexible. So you could actually build a dashboard similar for those guys purely by using like a data source filter and then filing that out. In reality, I would always guess that they would have tweaks that they'd want to make. So provided that they've got the Tableau knowledge, it's great to actually sit down with them and try and actually empower them to start making changes. If that's not a possibility, then sit down and have a conversation like you've had with the executive and design something for them. Because the more people you have championing this software, the better. If you've got everyone that has a Tableau server license or a Tableau online license, your way of distribution, like the PDF bursting, which you're kind of talking about, becomes so much easier because it can all be managed inside of an environment. You're not having to make workarounds. So I would take that energy and take the fact that they've championed this product and really take advantage of that. Build your political capital to then make changes that make your life easier. This is usually around the back end or having actually access to more standardized data. But that's generally the recommendation that I make. If you've got a great success, use the political capital that you've got within your business to then make changes to make your life easier. Any other questions?
What would you say is the best device to set up dashboards for?
Oh, man.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sorry. So he was asking, what's the best device that I find actually designing for? I guess I'm a little bit old school, so I still really like designing for desktops, primarily just because they are such larger real estate, and I get to put some more information, more customization inside of it. Mobile is also actually a really good way to get really good at refining information and knowing what's most important. Because you've got such smaller real estate, you know when you need to shed detail and remove things from it. So it's really good for actually enhancing your skills as a storyteller to know what components you need to make something which makes sense for somebody to consume. Okay, so I would like to say, if there are no more questions, hopefully this loads a bit faster than last time. Here are some repeats. Stay awesome, agents. And thank you ever so much for taking the time to come see my presentation.